Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is Hangout number 198. And if you see me sweating, this is a sign language for sweating. It's because here in Maryland, it's at 90 degrees. It's going to be between 90 and 100 for the next 10 days. And yes, I have air conditioning in the house, which is working really well at 78 degrees. It's supposed to be 70, but hey, it's 78. And then I got the lights. So yes, I will be toasty, and you in Tasmania, I would like to be there right now, cooling off with you. Just saying. Lord. So anyway, welcome everybody who is in the chat room. If you'd like to be in the chat room for my live shows, there are 2 a week. They hang out like today, right now, and also the case show on the weekends. Those are live shows for patrons. So please click the link below and join Patreon, $5 a month. And there's 2 shows a week. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. After that is my live shows are done, everything goes public. So it takes a week, but it goes public. And you can see everything that I have out here. You just can't be participating in the chat room. So, and you can then just subscribe to the channel, click the bell, check my playlist, and support me in one way or the other. All right, so let's go for it. All right, Lynn says it's 75 in Scotland, but we're not so used to it being so sizzling. Can you send the 75 back over here? Now, I actually love hot weather, but not when the air conditioning isn't working and you're trying to do a show. So I'm good with 75. 75 is a little cold for me. I prefer 80s. I'm real happy with 80s. So hi UK. I'm hot. That's what I'm hot, really hot. And Kara is now here too as well. Okay, did I say hello, Allison? Not sure. Anyway, let's go to the different kinds of news. And I'll start out with something just pleasant. Oh, so you're going to ask about the cat. You know, everybody always asks about Mac the cat. Yes, he's still coming around. There's Mac. Hello, Mac. Mac, I have a new trick with Mac. He's my feral cat, and he comes in usually every night, except when it rains crazy, and I'm like, dude, it's a dry house. Where are you? And he doesn't come in for the food, so all I can guess he's in some barn someplace, and he's not going to walk out. But I have a new trick now because, you know, I keep trying new things with him to make him get more used to me. So now when he comes in, I get out and I lay on the floor and stare him in the eyes because, you know, he tries to always keep his eyes closed, pretends he doesn't see me. So, and then I'm putting my fist out with the wet food on it in front of him, and he goes, but then he goes, okay, it is the food. So then he comes and licks it off, and then he works his way to standing in my lap and eating. But I'm trying to get him to the point where he will look at me without fear, and that I can put my hand near him without fear, and one day might be able to touch him. But it's been a year and a half, so it's a long process. But anyway, that's Mac the cat. And for one pleasant thing before the show, just because I'm going to have to mention the Karen Reed case here, I'm not going to talk about the evidence. I'm going to talk because, you know, my pet peeve is jury system, but also want to relate that to a lot of other things. The Diddy case, Lucy Letby, other cases where the whole jury system comes into play. And so I want to mention that. But before we do that, let's do something peaceful. I just finished this pastel painting. It's just calming and peaceful. Okay. Now we'll move on. All right. Okay, so let's go. If there's heavy rain, Mac has to make it through. That's correct. I think that is actually true. I think that, if he's someplace else, no, we live on its own farm, but there's also a landscaping company next door, which also has cows. So the landscaping company, funny story. So I'll tell you the story because I want to start with something pleasant because people might become angry during the show. And the funny story is across the way. So I live next to my daughter. This used to be a tobacco farm, and after the grandfather died, it was split up between many of the relatives, and the relatives are dying off and moving away. So there's very few of the relatives left, but we still have a zone farm, which is why my daughter, the police detective, has alpacas, llamas, a horse, a donkey, goat and chickens because she says, oh, it's own farm, I can have fun. So then across the way, there was a woman who had a huge cattle. Well, she raised cattle for meat. And she was a very nasty human being, not a likable human being. And she didn't like our side of the road at all. Anyway, one day she finally decided to give it all up. I don't know if she sold all the cows or she moved them away to where she was moving to, but the land was left to her son, who was a landscape guy. And the landscape guy moved over there and opened up the whole landscaping thing. And his children were like, Daddy, we missed the cows. We'd like a cow. So he bought a cow for his children. And now there's a bull out there and about a dozen cows. And I haven't seen any of them disappear. So I think he's got like a dozen pet cows, which we enjoy very much. And they get to wander all over the fields and go down near the road. They just have a wonderful life. And so it's kind of fun. So we have the cows across the street, which bring flies in the summer, which, whatever. Oh, thank you very much, Tetrafin. Welcome. Thank you. I don't know if I'm gifted. But I enjoy doing pastels. I really do. And it's a surprise that I have fun doing them. And I point out this to everybody. You want to have a balance in life. If to do things that bring you pleasure, that bring other people pleasure. You want to have friends and family and good hobbies, especially if you're involved in this kind of work. That keeps you sane because at least it gives you see some of the beauty of life, which is important. Okay. Well, that is freaky weird. I don't put out double. So Marianne is saying she's getting double messages about the shows that are upcoming. And I always send out a message before the day or two before the show to let everybody know it's coming up and then they can give some input to what they'd like in the show. And then the day of the show, I remind everybody, hey, come to the show. So there should be 2 messages, but Marianne said she got 4 messages. I'm like, what the heck? So a double of each, which makes no sense to me because that's not supposed to happen. I mean, I send out the messages through Patreon and it's a bulk message. I put the message in and it goes to everybody. If you have 2 accounts, yes, you would get double messages. And I always warn people, some people do have 2 accounts. They don't realize it. They get account in one for whatever reason. They start another account and they don't even know they have 2 accounts. But thank you for the extra money. And you say you don't, Marianne. I have no clue how that could even be possible. Go figure. Oh, you do that? Oh, that's cool. Wait a minute. Ceramics. That is very neat with chalks. I like it. All right. I'm a legend. Okay, it might be a nightmare. I don't know if I'm a legend. Okay. So anyway, I always want people to balance their lives. I think it's extremely important. Absolutely. I see too many people have unbalanced lives, and especially people who do work in fields that are kind of traumatic and give them PTSD. You have to do something to balance it out. So that you wake up and you see good and not always evil, It's important. Oh, you only got it this week, but not normally. What the heck? Yeah, I didn't do it because I don't have the energy to send out double messages. I just do it once. I mean, I send out 2 messages, but on separate days. So I don't get it. All right. Now, before I go to I'm just going to lay out. I'm going to talk about a few cases that just are in the news. And then I will talk about Karen Reed case, but not the evidence, because I don't want to having everybody argue over the flippant evidence again. I'm going to be talking about some of the issues in the general jury system. So I'm going to bring up Diddy, Lucia Letby. I'm going to talk about the 2 other nurse cases in Europe, which I held back from last week because I wanted people from Europe, UK, Ireland, or whatever to be here to be able, be awake when I do the show. So I saved it. So I'm going to talk about that. And some of the issues that I think are becoming a major issue in how we're handling trials at least in the United States, and apparently I think also it's also true in other countries. And I think this is a worldwide phenomenon. So I want to talk about it because it's not. I don't think it's what people think it is. And I think they don't really understand all the mechanisms that are going on behind it. So I'm going to talk about that. So I'm going to get to that second, and then I'll get to a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so the couple of things I want to talk about before I go to that, so I can have a pleasant intro. Okay, all right, let's talk about the missing children, the missing Nova Scotia children. There's two interesting things that are happening on that case. Let me find it. Okay, first one. This comes out of Global News Canada. And what they're saying here is Nova Scotia missing kids, quote, why policing expert believes case is now a criminal investigation. I can shorten that. These children were quite young, and the chances of them going that far are very limited. I always said that if you look at the actual backyard of the children who went missing, they had a great backyard. Now, people noted that it was kind of crappy, you know what I mean? It was kind of, there was some junk in there. I know, these parents didn't have a neat and pristine whatever. But if you're out in the country, you see a lot of this. I mean, where the kid goes out, walks out of the back into the backyard, and there's chickens to play with, and there's some play equipment, and there's a ball, and there's just it's a big area you can just run around and have a good time. You don't need to actually disappear out of there. Now, can you? Of course you can. If there's some part of the fencing that sucks, which is also quite common in rural areas. It's like, well, we should have fixed the fence, but we just didn't get to it because we were fixing the chicken coop, and we didn't get to fix that fence in that spot. So kids can get out. So let's say, but in general, in this particular case, there wasn't a lot of time, supposedly, according to the mom and stepfather, that these children were left on their own to get out of the house, which they oddly said. There's the original odd statements about that from the mother, where they knew they were in the backyard, even though they had no way of knowing that. And then if they were in the backyard, why did they rush away so quickly into the woods? And then they were looked for by the parents and weren't found. And then they have been searching for these very small children. So I'll read what this profiling expert, it's a Nova Scotia Police Detective, former. All right. His name is Jim Hoskins, retired Halifax Regional Police Officer and former major crime staff sergeant who's not working on the case. Says the actions from the police and the agencies involved have led him to this conclusion. They are looking at this with some criminal aspects as well. Oh, I love how he says that. They're looking at it with some criminal aspects. So he's not taking away the fact that the children could have just gotten lost, because people are so scared of saying anything. But it's a reasonable thing to say too. He doesn't want to get in trouble. So, okay, it could be still that the kids were lost, and that is true. Maybe it's down to 10%, but you can't take that away. The possibility that for whatever reasons they searched the living heck out of the area, and the children got past the perimeter they searched, or went down in some ditch that they just haven't seen the children. It's possible. He says they're looking at this with some criminal aspects as well. They just haven't said so. In my personal experience, if this is not a criminal investigation now, I'd be totally surprised. Okay, so he's saying, I'm betting on it, and then he says, let's see. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about how many people they polygraphed, how many people they talked to, the video stuff they've tried to get. They tried to get every piece of information about where these kids could have gone if they didn't go out of the backyard that day. And now we have a nefarious take. As a police officer who's taken part in similar investigations, Hoskins says he knows there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work going on. Well, that's as usual for most cases. And a lot of times the public and the family's innocent, will claim that the police aren't doing anything. And there's two sides to that. One is that the police are working their butts off, but they are not required to give hourly updates to the entire world, including the parents. They're not going to do that. That simply isn't the way it works. And if you're a family of a missing person, that is so difficult to live with, because you want constant updates. You want to know what's going on. But quite frankly, they can't do that. So that's one aspect. The other part is when they're like, we really ain't got nothing to work with. But we don't want to tell the family or community that. So we're just going to say the famous words. This is actually a famous statement. We're working on it. We're working on it. They will say that for the next 2 decades. We're working on it. They're not actually working on it. They got the case has been filed. It's just someplace. And if somebody comes in one day and says, my boyfriend just said on his deathbed that he killed 2 children. Oh, now they go, whoosh, they pull it out and they're like, well, now we're working on it. But we've been working on it for 2 decades, every day. And it's nonsense. But the problem the police have a lot of times telling the quote truth is because people don't like it. And they don't understand how police work. And this is, I'm going to bring up this point later with the Karen Reed case and other cases. People don't understand how things work. Not just the police, how prosecution works, how human beings work, how science works. It's they don't understand these things. And because they don't understand, they make demands that are way past the ability of any human being, for the most part, to provide, because that's not the way things work. So police are working on it. Anyway, that's what they said. All right. So they're looking at everything, essentially. But this police, retired police detective is basically saying they're doing an awful lot for some kids who just went missing. All right. There's another thing that's just come out with them, which is, oh, shut up. Yeah, here it is. Nova Scotia is now offering a lot of money. Nova Scotia is offering $150,000 for info on missing kids nearly 7 weeks after disappearance. Now, what does this mean? This is the provinces adding the case of the missing children from the rural Nova Scotia to the Major Crimes Reward Program nearly 7 weeks after they've disappeared. It means anyone who offers information on where Jack and Lillian Sullivan are can receive up to, keep this in mind, I'm going to tell you a little bit about reward programs here too, up to $150,000 if it leads to a conviction or arrest. Up to, I'll give you $5 for what you just told me. Up to is a very, very questionable word. I mean, you know. All right, so they're saying that that's what they're offering now. Now, the question, there's a couple questions. Why would they be offering this if they were missing children? Well, why not? If the children are missing and they're found they're tripped over by a hiker, well, what is the word here? If it leads to a conviction or arrest. So if there's no conviction or arrest because the children did actually go missing and just get lost and die in the wilderness, nobody's going to collect $150,000 if it wasn't a homicide. Okay, if it was a homicide, then what they're going to do is if it leads to a conviction or arrest, well, it should be the opposite way. If it leads to an arrest or conviction, you're going to get up to $150,000, which I don't know what quite that means. But I can tell you almost these reward programs, the weirdest thing is you never hear that they're paying out. And I'm bothered by that. I would love somebody to do a real investigation of the rewards programs, because you hear this all the time. If it give this money if it leads to an arrest or conviction. Well, if they determine that your information didn't actually lead to the arrest or conviction, then you're not going to get the money. And I don't understand how they keep doing these claims without any proof of the money being distributed. And I'd say I'm not a person to do that kind of research work. I'd love to see somebody research on how often this money actually gets paid out. Another thing you'll see sometimes with the rewards programs, it doesn't come from the police. It'll come from a parent or somebody in the community who knows they're never going to have to pay out. So they're willing to, hey, I'll offer this reward because I'm good. I know I can offer $1 million. I'm still never going to have to pay it. So there's a lot of things that go on that just aren't as people recognize. You don't believe they ran away? Well, let's put it this way again. If you're working on a police case, and this is where, again, I'm going to get to this later on when I'm discussing juries. if you're investigating a case, what you want to do is take the evidence that exists, you analyze it to provide the best leads, because you cannot investigate every single thing on this planet. People think that, oh, well, the tip line, you can get 10,000 tips. You can't investigate 10,000 tips because most of them are garbage. Because let's say a child was kidnapped by a guy, some serial killer, some child sex predator, kidnapped off the road. How many people do you think would actually know anything about that? Probably the guy who did it, maybe his girlfriend or his mommy or something. But the rest of those 10,000 people are full of it. There are people calling up to blame their ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands, they're psychics. There's a whole bunch of garbage that comes in. So the police cannot waste their time with everything. And then when you get rid of all the erroneous tips, just getting down to the evidence itself, you can look at evidence and you can say, look, the evidence heavily points to this direction, like 80% of it points this way. If 80% of the evidence points this way, you focus 80% of your efforts this way. You should have some 20% to put this way because you haven't excluded the 20%. As if this gets to 90 and this gets to 10, this gets to 98%, this gets to 2%. Again, you're going to have to adjust how much effort you put into both areas. I think you should never get tunnel vision, but you also cannot spend equal time on every single theory out there because that's not the way you work a case. So in this particular instance, at this point in time, it's not looking like the children likely left on their own that morning. And that's for a bunch of reasons. One is because I think the backyard is perfectly reasonable, that they weren't found nearby, even if they got out. The mother's statements are questionable. There's a bunch of reasons to think probably they didn't disappear on their own. I would do, at this point, 90%. And I would keep the 10% looking in the area just in case everything else was just, people say there's no such thing as coincidence. I don't agree with that statement. I think that is a ludicrous statement. Sometimes there are some amazing coincidences in these kind of investigations and weird things. People say strange things. There's just things that you can't even believe are true happen to be true. And you're like, what the heck? So I never take that viewpoint that it couldn't be like, well, you got to be kidding me. Because I've had a couple cases where I've said that. You got to be kidding me. Who knew? How freaky is that? Something completely an anomaly happens. Anomalies happen. So therefore, at least that 10% ought to still be hanging around. So you shouldn't give up on the 10% just in case that is what actually happened. But do you put 90% into looking for missing children who wandered away and only 10% into something else happened? No, it should be 90% into something else happened at this point. In the beginning, maybe 50-50. Now it should be 90%, 10%. But I don't, also, I'm not inside the investigation. So it's going to be whatever. It's like, oh, that's a good point. Lynn, it's like doctors analyzing symptoms. They may point to a likely condition, but not everything presents textbook. Exactly. That's a good way to look at it. That way we don't get too arrogant that no matter what, we have to be 100% right on something all the time. People say that as, for myself as a profiler, they're like, well, Pat Brown, do you think you're always right? Sure. No, I think that I do my best to analyze the evidence now, again, two different areas. What I present on YouTube is not a professional profile. What I present on YouTube is educational to show you how a profiler would think through the evidence and lean in a direction. A professional profile will be when I work with the police department, have access to everything, and give them a professional profile, which again doesn't say I'm 100% right. It says these, in my opinion, this is what, when I analyze the evidence, what I think the evidence supports as to what happened and who most likely did it. And therefore, I think you should focus mostly on these leads, not ignoring those other leads that maybe if I misanalyze evidence or I'm not aware of some evidence or for whatever reasons, there's just two possibilities. Keep that in mind. So that's the way to be rational, just to be rational about things. Okay, so that's one thing I want to talk about. The next thing I wanted to mention was this guy. I just want to mention this they're still looking for this guy that killed his 3 little girls. Not a question they killed those 3 little girls. And it's horrific. But I want to point this out because when I'm going to be talking about jury system issues in a minute. This came out on, come on, I'm sorry, my, come on, show up. All right. My internet just went down on, okay. All right. The sheriff says sympathies toward Travis Decker, the father of the 3 little girls who killed, he's accused of killing his 3 little girls, which pretty much if he didn't kill those 3 little girls, it would be, I mean, the chances of that not being true are like 0.001%. So as the search continues for the man accused of murdering his daughters in Washington State, authorities caution the public against potential sympathetic feelings toward Travis Decker. And you say, how can the public have sympathetic feelings toward a man who would murder his 3 little girls? Well, this is a problem we have with the jury system, that we have people who feel sympathy toward, especially women, who kill their children. Why? Because because they have postpartum depression, or their husbands are crappy, or whatever. They have mental issues. There's sympathy that tends to go toward women. In this case, oddly, it's going toward Travis Decker. Because of why? His history of reported mental illness and experience in family court. So there's a whole thing about, in family court, a lot of times the father gets screwed, because if the children are young, especially female, the tendency is for the judge to have the children go with the mother. And sometimes what will happen is the judge will just go with whatever the judge thinks is the safest location at the moment in time, so that he or she, as a judge, will not get screwed if they move the children from what seemed like a safe environment to a questionable environment and the kid's going to end up dead. Then as a judge, you're really in trouble. Supposedly, it said his experience. I haven't seen all the different experiences he supposedly has. He's got mental health problems. He's got anger management problems. He did not go to the things he was supposed to go to. He's living out of his vehicle. Those children should never have been with him. Now, if he was mistreated in a court of law, I sympathize with that. But the children's safety comes first, and you as a parent have to suck it up and to make sure that you do everything you can to prove that you're a good parent. Get your bloody self on your feet. Make sure you're don't have drug issues, alcohol issues. Make sure you go to the classes you need to go to get a good job and get a place to live, and then be willing to work with the other parent to see the children when they're also with somebody else. It's a safe location until you build up trust and a background that says you're safe for those kids to be with. Now, nothing's ever going to be perfect. Somebody could go through all that and still kill the kids. It can happen, because sometimes you'll take certain people who kill their children and they come from what looks like a beautiful home, and that they were lovely people and a great mother, and that they still kill the kids. So you can't stop everything. But this guy had issues, and whatever reasons he ended up with those issues, or if sometimes he was treated less than fairly, still, he probably should not have had access to those children. And so the sheriff is saying there are some that may be sympathetic to his cause, which I think would be misguided. I mean, he's accused of murder, not just once, but 3 times, and he is a danger. So for those who might have sympathy toward him, please allow the opportunity for us to do our job. And this has become a real issue with the public, that they interfere with the job of law enforcement, because they decide, whomever they are, that they understand the situation better, that they have sympathy towards somebody. So therefore, again, Karen Reed, that the public comes out in force, whether she's guilty or not guilty, and she's been found not guilty, that they come out in force because they believe they understand better than whatever, and they start interfering with the justice system, or with the police investigations. And this has become, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, a big, huge problem. But so anyway, with UFC, even if you have sympathy for him, he murdered 3 children. You can all have discussions as long as you're not interfering about why he would do such a thing. So yeah, I think supervised contact would be reasonable when a person cannot provide proof of safety. I think that should have been the way it is. Clarissa says, I rarely have sympathy for murderers. Well, no, there are extreme occasions where somebody might go, but yes, especially when it comes down to murdering anybody who's didn't deserve. Well, they didn't deserve it. Children should not be murdered. I mean, yeah. So one more thing I want to do before I go to the subject matter, which I'm going to say I'm going to include Lucy Letby. So don't go to sleep, anybody who's in the UK or Europe. I'm going to get to Lucy Letby, and because I was asked, why is this thing happening now with Lucy Letby where they're now saying she's innocent? But just before I get there, I just want to mention this one case. All right, so this is Lauren Steele, disappeared while on her way to Las Vegas for treatment. This is an interesting case because I want to point out this because there's very little written on this. This is the kind of stuff that goes to Facebook. And people believe, and the problem is this, in this case, well, families can't find their daughter. They want to put out what they want to put out. But as a public, this stuff now goes to everybody in the public. And they start taking it upon themselves to become detectives, and they start harassing the police. And that's the problem. They start inserting themselves into investigations because they think they know something that they actually don't know. What don't they know? All right, let me read you the article. And now I'm going to show you another picture. This is Lauren Steele. This article comes from News Nation, which pisses me off because News Nation is supposed to be a little bit more. I mean, you get Yahoo.com, you get a bunch of wacky, places on the internet where you can get all kinds of information. A lot of times it's just, repeated information. And this is from News Nation. People tend to believe in News Nation because it's supposed to be a little bit more legitimate. Okay, News Nation. And basically, I think borrowed this off the other channels. They plagiarize like hell. People don't understand this. The news media plagiarizes like crazy. They don't do their own investigations. They just take it from everybody else and then repeat it, which to me is not journalism. That's just plagiarism and fake. And a lot of times it's not even true. So you're repeating rumors. All right, this is a survivor. This is the woman, Lauren Steele, a survivor of human trafficking. First problem, never been proven she was human. She was not trafficked by. Who was she trafficked by? Where's the proof she was trafficked? Oh, if you're going to say this as a news channel, you should have some evidence. A survivor of human trafficking was on her way to get treatment. She was supposedly going to get treatment, or the rest of it. Okay, she was on her way to get treatment for being a survivor of human trafficking. I don't even know. I'm not even understanding this. But after her flight landed, there was no trace of her on board. Now her family fears predators may have found her again. Lauren Steele left her home in Carlisle, Pennsylvania last August, telling her family she had been trafficked. That's not proof. She's telling her family stuff. Just because she's telling her family stuff does not make it true. And she was fleeing her captors. Okay, let me point this out. Is she an attractive young woman? Yes. Could she be involved in prostitution? Yes. Does that prove that she is in captivity? No. Generally speaking, this whole nonsense about sex trafficking of girls of her age, that she's being forced into it and she can't get out of it. Now she's obviously at home and she's got to flee people who are tracking her down. That's a lot of work, man. You can just get another girl who needs drugs or is homeless or whatever. It's not that hard. You don't need to be chasing all over the country over one girl, unless you're got some weird obsession with her. And then I would say it would not be captors. I'd just be like a pimp or something who had a thing with it. She told her family she was heading to Las Vegas for a program that would provide rehabilitative care for what she had experienced. Get out of here. What are you talking about? I'm sorry. maybe if one of you finds this rehabilitative program for ex-prostitutes, ex-trafficking people, let me know, because I would assume, first of all, you're going to go to Las Vegas for that, because as far as I know, Las Vegas is a great place for prostitution. I mean, that's one of the top places for that. You can make good money, because of the casinos. So is that what you're really going to Las Vegas for? So anyway, then it says she was so excited about going to this program and really looking forward to it, says her mother. Again, this is all statements from the daughter. Lauren Steele had previously rented a room in Virginia after finding an ad. But after renting the room, she discovered she was in trouble. What was she doing in Virginia is the next question one has, but there's no information on that. Her godmother said that she was a trusting person. Okay. She wouldn't think anybody would do that. It's like, Lauren, you've got to be careful. You're a pretty girl. Look, there's a ton of pretty girls out there. They don't get swept up into captured and put into sex trafficking. That doesn't work that way. But her family said she told them the men she rented the room from were traffickers. She said they were tracking her phone, they were tracking her, and when they go out, they had a lock on the outside of the other door. How did she get out? Lauren Steele notified the FBI. Did she notify the FBI? Do we have proof she notified the FBI? I have no idea. And said nothing came of it. Well, either she didn't notify the FBI, or they thought this story was squirrely. She was able to break free, but she lived in fear she'd be found again. She kept moving around, changing her phone number. She was afraid these people would harm her or family. Look, she's not that important. I hate to say this, family, but she's just one of many girls. If she changes her phone, goes back to her family, they're not going to chase her all the way back to Pennsylvania just to get her. It's just not worth the effort. I mean, that's what people don't understand. So now she was supposedly, August 5th, she was scheduled to fly from Pennsylvania to Las Vegas to get this help that she needed. However, her flight was delayed due to weather conditions, and the airline accommodated her by putting her up in a hotel. She said that she was at the hotel and there was a man outside to help make sure she got to the airport. Make sure she got on the plane. Oh, come on now. What airlines could she be on that would do all that for her? I mean, if she got even a hotel room, I'd be shocked. But if she did, nobody's going to help you get to the airport, the hotel, and back safely. Come on. This is the stupidest story I've ever heard. And then she said, we don't know who the man was, where the man came from, or anything. Well, because he didn't exist. This was the last time they heard from Steele. What they do know is that Steele's phone took a flight from Pennsylvania to Chicago to Las Vegas. But authorities say they have no proof that Steele had her phone on those flights. So her family claims her phone went to Las Vegas. The authorities say they have no proof the phone was on the flight. Missing persons cases are common in Las Vegas. 300 adults go missing there every month because they're running away from something, because they're involved in drugs, because they're involved in prostitution, but not because they've been kidnapped. I just want Las Vegas police to go there, but they're not doing anything. I guess because we can't prove she landed. Does anybody have proof that she physically landed there besides her phone? Okay. Now, the Pennsylvania State Police have classified Lauren Steele as missing and endangered because of what? Mental health issues and drugs and alcohol. Oh, she was going to an unknown facility or treatment center for victims, survivors of human trafficking. Unknown. She has drug, alcohol, and mental health problems. I just want to make sure she's not in somebody's basement, chained up or being tortured every day, Susan Steele said. I mean, if she's somewhere and it's on her own, I'm okay with it, if that's what she wants. But I don't know that, and they don't know that. I can't tell you if this young woman is alive or dead. I can't tell you if she is willingly away from her family, involved in things that drugs and prostitution. I can't tell you that. Could she be dead? She could be. She could have hooked up with the wrong person, be in the middle of the desert. But what are the police supposed to do? because as far as I can see, they don't really have any evidence that anybody kidnapped her. She is an adult. She has the right to go where she wants, and they can't search down things. They don't have any proof, apparently, that she was even on the plane. So yeah, so what they're doing is they're saying she is this missing. She's a survivor. So this whole stuff that's been put out there, she is, I think, missing and endangered is reasonable to say. That's what the police have said, missing and endangered. They didn't say she was kidnapped. They just know she has drug, alcohol, mental problems. So she's missing and endangered, which is true because people who have those problems are easy to take advantage of. So she could be in somebody's basement, but it's not because of all the things that she claimed prior to disappearing. And this is where people start saying, oh my God, she's a sex trafficked. The police aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Why aren't the police helping? And then the whole little internet land gets all involved and gets all incensed and outraged because the police aren't doing their job when they do not know the facts. And this is where I'm getting into the problem we have in general with so much today. A squirrely story indeed. It is. It's very off. Very, very off. Echoes of the Hannah case. Oh yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. She's coming out with a book, I think. So we're going to find out the truth. Along with Sherry Papini's book, which already was the truth. I don't know if anybody's actually read Sherry Papini's book. God, I hope they wasted their money on that one. But this is a big problem today, and it is the problem, I believe, with the jury system as well, because we have a problem. There's good and bad. This is the thing. It's life. As years go on, things change radically. And sometimes they change for the better. Sometimes they change for the worse. Sometimes, depending on where we are in history, is whether we have opportunities or we lose opportunities. For example, I would never have been a criminal profiler if it hadn't been for the internet. Because you can't go to your yellow pages back in, what am I back in? Let's say 1980s, 70s, 80s. I couldn't have put an ad in the yellow pages and said, hi, the criminal profiling agency. I would have gotten no work. Nobody would know who I am, because who hires criminal profilers in their local town? Nobody does that. A detective, maybe, mostly divorce cases. So back in those days, I couldn't have reached out to very many people. Also, those were the days before internet and computers even. I do remember typing. Oh my God, I hated typing because it was so slow. I typed very fast, but it was still too slow for me. And I hated doing the editing. You had to take a little paper, that white thingy, and you had to bang on it, and it's a mess. So computers changed everything for me. I could type quickly, I could move things around, and that's when I could write. And then there was a thing called websites, and I was able to put up my first website, which went out to the world. And that's how television found me, because they put in criminal profiler Washington, D.C., and they came up with me, and I started my television career overnight. Never would have happened without the internet. Today, I'm still here because of the internet. And so that has been a great advantage to me. My other career, medical sign language interpreting, has been killed by the progress in the world today, because they have made the job so a lot of it's gone to video instead of going to the hospitals and interpreting over at the hospitals and helping people and seeing them and chatting with them. And it was really nice. It was a wonderful interaction, and I really enjoyed it because it was great. And I made good money, and I went to the hospitals. But now they have a certification method that's so bad, people who've been working in the field 10 years can't pass it. Maryland just passed it last year, and they had to actually extend it an extra year because they were losing all their interpreters who couldn't pass the stupid test. They have gotten very political. They've gotten very racial. It's like, if you're white, you can't interpret for black people. If you're black, black people can pretty much interpret everybody. But right now, as a white person, I'm not supposed to interpret for black people. And that I signed Black American Sign Language because my entire clientele has been 95% African American all of my career as a sign language interpreter. So if I went back to the work, they wouldn't let me go. And this is the way I sign. I sign that I'm part of that community, but because they have these rules now, and they've instituted all these other rules, and they've gone to video. During COVID, they went to video. So instead of going to the hospital, now you have to sit in a call center and just interpret in a booth. So people are quitting like crazy because it causes carpal tunnel syndrome, and people don't want to study interpreting for years, become fluent in American Sign Language, become great interpreters, just sit in a booth. They don't want to do it. So the whole field has crashed and burned. Now some interpreters will disagree with me that they're doing fine in the field, and maybe they are. But for me, it crashed and burned. So changes in the world, cause good and bad, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I guess that's just life forever. People probably didn't like cars when they came in because they liked, the horses better, and but that things always change. And so when it comes down to how we deal with the criminal justice system, we've had massive changes there as well. One of the first things we've had is that criminal justice system used to be, and again, this is not all good, mind you. Since there was no internet, all of your information came from the regular media, the mass media, which I have to admit I don't do a lot of anymore because I don't trust them because they have their agendas and that's what they're going to promote. So, but if you lived in, like, for example, Washington, D.C. back in the day, your choices were the Washington Post and the Washington Star and some of the local news stations, which you saw your 30 minutes at, I think, 5 or 6 o'clock, and then 30 minutes at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, and a couple of radio stations. Very limited, no internet. So the average citizen couldn't have huge discussions with everybody and their brother. And so they got a certain amount of information in, and they couldn't necessarily act on it unless they got themselves a cohesive group that perhaps approached the mayor or a senator or something like that. Now what we have is large blocks. We have, the ability for information to go out to the public, whether it's correct or not, has nothing to do with it. Massive amount of information coming out 24-hour a day media on television, 24 hours a day on the internet, more networks than you know what to do with. And then, of course, YouTube is huge, Twitter, which is now X, TikTok, Facebook, massive amounts of information. And people who are manning those things, they're not vetted. So a lot of this is just unvetted stuff that's just going out in a mass quantity. So what we have is we're able to develop mobs that just believe in one thing or believe in the other. And it could be they believe pro or con, it doesn't matter. They're just huge mobs. And these can influence juries because the juries cannot be protected from them in this day and age, especially when we're not putting gag orders, which I think we should be doing. Very few cases have gag orders on them. The defense attorneys go on, the defense attorneys especially, because the prosecution can't do this. Defense attorneys go all over television and the internet, and they promote the defense theory in huge numbers. And they get people like in the Karen Reed case, Turtle Boy, where again, I'm not getting whether you think the verdict was correct or not. But you get somebody like Turtle Boy, who was totally free Karen Reed, and he's out there and he got huge amounts of people following him. And he was working with Karen Reed and the defense attorney. Prosecution didn't have this going for them. So they had this massive group of people who then show up in person to the courthouse, dressed in pink and protesting, free Karen Reed, free Karen Reed. The jury has to contend with this. They're not in a place of great decorum, where the information on the case is pretty much kept to just the courtroom, which is where it should be. The information on the case should just be, for those jurors, they should only see it in the courtroom. They shouldn't be influenced by anything from the outside. They should be in the courtroom in a quiet situation, listening to the evidence and making their determinations based on that. But that's not the way it works. And what's interesting is, and I pointed this out on the Karen Reed case, there were people there who the amount of protesting that went on shows me that they don't believe in the jury system either. Because here's the problem. If you believe that the civilian jury system worked, if you absolutely believe that, hands down, you wouldn't be protesting anything. You wouldn't have to try to influence the jury before they get into the jury room. You wouldn't have to have them go by you with huge swarms of people saying, hey, if you don't, you better come to the right decision. You wouldn't have to be bullying them if you believed that it worked. And I think this is the problem. I think rationally, people cannot believe that this actually is a sensible system. So I just want to point out, I did now, before this, the trial verdict came down, which she was found not guilty of murder, not guilty of manslaughter, and only guilty of operating under the influence, OUI is their term there. So essentially, that's it. She wasn't involved in, according to the jury, they've determined she's not guilty of having any cause of the death of John O'Keefe. And one could say it's because they felt that there was reasonable doubt. People say that. And I don't want to get into the case right now. Again, this is why I've already discussed this case to the ends of the earth. I do believe she was guilty. I believe the totality of the evidence was fine. I think the prosecution case was good. I personally think that the jury was highly influenced by things they did not understand and by the bullying crowd. And that's my opinion. Let's not get into it here. You can believe otherwise. And I just want to say this before I talk about more of the jury stuff. One of the problems we have today, and I've seen this, people have been so nasty toward me because I happen to believe she's guilty according to the evidence as a profiler. And I have had people say, "Oh, I used to like you, Pat, but now I know you're a total blazing idiot. Obviously, you just bought by you're a shill for the prosecution." Just nonsensical, nasty stuff. Not just, Pat, I disagree with you, which is fine. But we have come to this is becoming a problem in our jury system as well. We have come to a time in our history where people cannot be friendly to people with differing opinions. And I'm like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, who said, "Opinions vary and walk away." Once upon a time, you could have a different political opinion. You could even argue about it a little bit, and then you drink some beer and go, whatever, and you're okay. Hey, you believe what you believe. I believe I wouldn't vote for your guy. I wouldn't vote for your guy. But everybody was okay. People didn't hate their friends and family for not believing what they believe politically. And what we've seen is a failure in society now to be able to be friends, to still care about people. Where like people have thrown away their families and friends because they have a different political opinion, and it's horrific. And we see that with religion as well now. It's gotten very, very nasty. And I remember times when, I've visited many people. He used to go to somebody else's house, and let's say I went to somebody's house and let's say they were very evangelical Christian, for example, and I'm not evangelical Christian, but they wanted to do a prayer, and they said to me, "Pat, would you like to say the prayer?" And I'm not real comfortable doing those kind of things, so I just say, "No, you please go ahead." And I would fold my hands and bow my head because I have respect for the people and their beliefs. I've been to mosques, I've been to Catholic churches, I've been to Presbyterian churches. I've been to Buddhist places of Buddhism. I've been to mandirs, which is a Hindu temple. And I just respected what people were doing there. And if I didn't feel comfortable participating in the actual ceremony, I didn't. But I could still be respectful. And I'll point out this one time, which I thought was really interesting when I was in India. So we were taking one of these gondola rides. I was going across a beautiful, like a kind of a big, huge, I don't know what you want to call it, big ditch. But anyway, so you're going across from one little mountain to the next and seeing all the beautiful scenery. And you end up at a Hindu temple. And we got out at that Hindu temple. And with us were some Hindus. And they went into the temple to do puja, which is worship. So they went in and they did their puja to whatever god it was in the temple or gods. And the other people with the group were Seventh-day Adventists. They didn't go into the temple. They just stood outside and chatted and smiled and laughed and waited for their friends to finish what they were doing and come back out. And this was a group of people who worked together for the education of children. And the education of children was offered to poor children, regardless of their religious backgrounds. So whether they were Muslim or whether they're Hindu or whether they were Zoroastrian or whatever the heck they were, Jewish, because you have the Jews in India as well, whatever, Christian, whatever, they were allowed to come. And people were pleasant about it. They're like, oh, so that's your religion. That's fine. And this is our religion. And sometimes they crisscross, because I know a lot of Hindus will celebrate Christmas because I like it. But the point being that people used to be friendly. And if you were a different political thing, you were friendly. And if you thought Karen Read was innocent and you thought Karen Read was guilty, you could still be friends. You could discuss it and be friendly. But this is something that's gone by the wayside, and we're in a crisis situation, at least in the US, and I think a lot of the world has gone that way, where people are taking such radical sides. They can't understand that you can be on a side but not be radical to the point where you hate the people on the other side. You can just understand that you think differently, and maybe you'll come to some, maybe you'll learn from each other. Maybe you'll come to some, maybe I'll even agree on some things. Maybe you'll even change your mind on some things. It's okay. I don't mind if somebody wanted to say, hey, Pat, I think, did you look at this? And I'd say, yes, I did, but I don't, maybe I learned something. Even as a professional, I can learn something from another person who's professional or non-professional in the field of profiling. So this is a big, huge problem we're having today. And it's being exacerbated by the internet, where people can then come into mobs of people who hate the other group of people. So the Free Karen Read came in and were absolutely vicious to people who didn't believe that Karen Read was innocent. And I can't say what the people thought she was innocent. I'm not saying if they were that nice to the people who thought she was guilty. Again, both two sides on that. But it just gets so nasty. And because of that, it's hard to seat a jury that can be rational and not be emotional and not be and because they absolutely see everything that's out there. I don't care what questions they're asked. Have you seen anything about the Karen Read case? No, I have no idea about that case. Get out of here. Of course you do. Of course you do. And so you're going in there with a whole bunch of feelings about the case. And if you cannot be rational about those feelings and not become enraged, and this is what I wrote after the verdict came out. I wrote, I am not at all surprised at the Karen Read verdict, which has nothing to do with justice, but the ludicrous U.S. system of untrained civilian jury guessing, because they're not trained. So they are literally guessing what the evidence means, while under incredible manipulation and pressure from attorneys, both sides, media, YouTubers, and an angry mob. Now, somebody said, well, Pat, if they had come back, she was guilty, you would have said the civilian jury system worked. And the answer to that is no, I would not have thought that at all. I would have thought we got lucky. People who think she's guilty got lucky. I also think that people who thought she wasn't guilty got lucky, because every time we go into these cases, both sides will say, both prosecution and defense attorneys will say, well, we're going to have to see what they come up with. Why? It's a crapshoot. They always say it's a crapshoot. If it's a crapshoot, this shouldn't be the system we work under. You wouldn't want a crapshoot for your surgery, a crapshoot for whether your car is going to work, a crapshoot whether the rocket's going to go up and down or the airplane's going to go up and down. You don't want a crapshoot. You want to say, well, I hope they know what they're doing. No, you want to make sure that the person who is doing your surgery has the highest levels of skill you can get, and not like, well, he took a couple classes. Hopefully he'll be good with that all night. You wouldn't want a crapshoot. You want to be pretty secure that whoever is making the determinations and going to, in this case, a life and death decision. It wasn't a death penalty case, but again, mostly a life and death decision for Karen Read. For the defendant, the jury knows that every decision they make can put that person in prison for life or on death row. It's a huge decision, and they are told they have to make that decision over everybody else, even though they've got zero training. They're just 12 people off a bus stop. They just pick 12 people off a bus stop who they forced into servitude, because you're forced to be on that You're forced to be on that jury unless you're going to, you can figure out how to get out of it. But if you're just a good, decent person, you want to be honest, or if you're not honest, you just really want to be on that jury, which I'll get to the Diddy case just in a minute about that. You've got people who, with no training, are forced to try to determine whether the attorneys are fooling them, whether the experts are full of crap because the experts are giving different opinions and they can't both be right. And they have to try to understand how all the totality of the evidence fits together. And it's very difficult. So what tends to happen is that when they get confused, which is not unreasonable that they would, after 12 people, one or two confused people going, man, I can't figure out this crap. I just can't. It's kind of like me with taxes. I just guess. I guess because it drives me insane. I'm not good with taxes. I'm like, I hope this will work. And if it doesn't work, I guess they'll just charge me more money later. I'm not good at it. So I guess. They're not good at it. So they guess. Now, there might be a few people who are really quite amazing, but they're going to have 12 people who have that understanding. And they can't possibly. It's ludicrous. So you got to have a few people on there going, I don't have a clue. And considering some of the responses I have gotten and some of the analyses people have sent me about why somebody's guilty or not guilty are so off the mark. I'm like, oh my God, that's why we shouldn't have a civilian jury system, because what you're saying is nonsensical. But if you're on that jury, you guess. And justice should not be guessed at. So that's why I'm for a professional jury. At least get the best jury we can get in there with training, who are being paid so they're not losing their job or trying to get home to their family. Also being bullied, because the judge will send them back. You got to work it out. What do you mean work it out? If 12 people if they don't agree by the end of the actual trial, what the heck? If they don't know when they've heard all the evidence, if they don't already know what their verdict is, if you have to go in there for days and beat the hell out of each other, and you have to get some bullies on there, finally bully a few people into agreeing with them, that's not justice. That's insanity. And yet, that's the way it is. And so, yeah, I have a lot of problem with that. And it was interesting because let me see if I can pull this one up, because Jennifer Coffendaffer, who thought Karen Reed was guilty, just want to point this out. She wrote this to me. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, where is it? All right. Okay, I think let me find the statement she wrote to me. And I thought it was an interesting statement. Okay, here it is. This is to me. The jurors were seated for 2 months. Poor jurors. They heard over 30 days worth of testimony. And I have worked on cases where I have to, this is the other thing that drives me crazy. And this is why I feel terrible for the jurors. I don't blame the jurors for anything. People think I'm anti the jurors. I'm not. I'm anti the jury system, not the jurors. Those poor jurors. I mean, I've worked on cases where I go to the police department and spend 40 hours a whole week looking at all through the evidence, maybe sometimes 2 weeks. Sometimes I get information. Sometimes they'll send me home with the information. I might spend a month going over and over the stuff. I might be, because this isn't being presented to me, so I have to go through everything. But I have to, when there's a lot of testimony, a lot of information, and a lot of their stuff is boring as hell in court, so let's put you to sleep, and you just get exhausted, and they can't take notes. I don't think they could take notes in this. They're not allowed to take notes. Well, cripes, I can't remember crap from yesterday. If I can't take notes, I'm screwed. And yet I'm supposed to sit there and listen and try to remember things and try to figure out on the spot, oh my God, I've had no training, but hey, okay, what is this guy saying? What is this guy saying? Oh, this sounds more, I don't know. Maybe it is dog scratches on his arm. I don't know. Maybe the car didn't hit him. Maybe the car did hit him. They're all over the place. They heard over 30 days worth of testimony. Of course, deliberation should take a few days. No, I disagree, because that's the problem. It shouldn't. And Jennifer Coffendaffer says, I would expect nothing less. Well, that's because they're going to have to figure out how they can get 12 people to agree, which means that 12 people aren't agreeing. And therefore, somebody's got to be beaten into submission. And then she says at the end, keeping the faith in this jury at profiler Pat Brown. Well, Jennifer Coffendaffer, they found her innocent or not guilty. They found her not guilty. And she said she's going to have to be happy with accept the jury's decision. She says that. But she thought she was going to have faith in a jury. Why would you have faith? What is faith in a jury when they have no training and they're going through all this hell and being pressured in all these ways? How can you have faith in any of that? That's nonsense, in my opinion. And so I disagree with that. And then this was said by one more thing as a. Wendy Murphy said, studies show that people are much more willing to hold on to obvious lies than accept that they were dumb enough to believe them in the first place. So she's kind of angry at the jury. She thinks they're like, how could you people come up with this? Well, see, that's the problem. You can't be angry at a jury either. Should we be angry at Casey Anthony jury? Now, personally, the claim there was that prosecution didn't prove their case well enough. I disagree. I think they did a very fine job, just because Jose Baez threw some reasonable doubt into the brains of these jurors, which it was totally unreasonable, but they fell for it. Because, as she says, Wendy Murphy does say this, which I do agree with, criminal defense tactics are like politics. Many defendants use dog and pony show tricks, absolutely, to distract and confuse the jury and the public. That is true, which is why I want a professional jury, because those defense attorneys can't play those dog and pony tricks on people like me, because I know they're just not even going to bother, because they know it's not going to go over. So we would have shorter trials too. But you can't blame the jury. They did their best under duress. So I have no anger toward the jury at all. I'm frustrated because of the whole jury system, but I'm not angry with the jury. So that jury could have gone either way, and that's the problem. So if the jury had found her guilty of at least manslaughter, the Free Karen Reed people would be outraged. They would say somehow the jury was bought. That then the Innocence Project would roll in. Innocence Project would have the next, they'd have the next whole bunch of stuff that they would be doing to say that the prosecution did illegal stuff. Who knows? Because that's the process we have today. It's become a huge, massive game show, reality show, and it isn't a place of seriousness and decorum. It's just getting out of hand all over the place. And it's unfair to the defendants, it's unfair to the victims, and it's unfair to the jury. And it's just, I don't think, a proper way to proceed. So that's my thought on Karen Reed. I'm going to go to Diddy, and then I'm going to go to Lucy Letby and the two cases in Europe about the other two nurses who people think are innocent now. Let's see. Again, I'm not going to put up any comments that have anything to do with the evidence here, because it's not. I think I am amazed that they're not taking notes in a jury trial, because I literally don't remember crap. I mean, I take notes when I'm trying to figure out stuff. I mean, I take less notes doing this show because this is. I do take notes, but if I'm working for a police department, I'm going through everything and I'm making sure I have all the notes as to. So yeah, how they're going to understand and remember all the stuff, just crazy. Yes, I think this is an unusual thing. All 12 have to agree, not even a majority. You can't get 12 people to agree on anything. I mean, and it's just, I think that's kind of nonsensical. If I were doing a professional jury, I think I'd go with 4 out of 5 on a professional jury, because I've seen some professionals on YouTube who would come up with not guilty on Karen Reed. Now, I've seen 2 different versions of that. One is that they literally think that the evidence doesn't support that she killed him, and others think that the evidence doesn't support that the prosecution presented a good enough case, which neither I quite understand. So she either hit him with the car or she didn't. I mean, that's the crux of the whole thing. So I'm not going to get into what evidence proves that he was hit by the car and didn't go into the house, and what evidence proves he didn't get hit by the car and went into the house. I don't want to go there again in this lifetime. But the fact is, to get all 5 people to agree, sometimes there's one person that really doesn't agree for whatever reasons, and the other people are going. So I would go with 4 out of 5. I think that would be fair enough. And for the most part, in elections and all those kind of things, it's if you had to have a majority, nobody would ever be elected to political office, and nobody ever be elected to the school board. You know what I mean? Nobody ever be elected to anything. And if you're going to go out to dinner, you say, "Hey, what do you all want to eat?" And 6 people want to eat Italian food, and 2 people want to eat Chinese food. Guess where you eat? Italian food. You don't sit there and wait, okay, until we can all agree. So how would they all agree? I can tell you how. The 6 Italian food people will bully the 2 Chinese people into agreeing to go to the Italian food. Unless you just say, whoever has the most votes will go there. Maybe next week we'll go to the other place. That would be really fair. So, yeah. A lot of that would be nice. They were allowed to take Karen Read. It's hard to remember which courts allow it and which ones don't. I don't quite understand it. Don't go, as I say, please, Caitlin, stop. Don't discuss the evidence of the case, please. All right, don't, because it's been discussed ad nauseum, and people are so enraged. Again, this is another thing I just like to point out to people, that if you are getting enraged about this case, if this is making you lose your mind and hate people, same thing for politics or religion, the problem is with you, because you don't have, if you can't like people who think differently than you could go, I don't know why they think that way. But if it makes you that angry and you have to say nasty things and call people names and all this kind of stuff, you have the problem. You are emotionally disturbed. And I've seen a lot of people being emotionally disturbed in politics. And there's places I've walked into, I see just people spitting at each other, just vicious. And I'm like, calling people just the most horrible names. And it's like, stop doing that. Stop doing that. And to me, the person who's calling the names, that's the person with the problem. So that's why people say, Pat, don't take things personally. Guess what? I don't. Because I absolutely know that if somebody's angry with me because I happen to believe, from the totality of the evidence and my experience as a professional, I happen to believe Karen Read was guilty. I do. But if it makes you hate me, and I've had this, Pat, I used to like you, but I won't watch your shows anymore. I'm unsubscribing because you don't believe she's innocent. Now, maybe if you were Karen Read's mother, I get it. But you're not. You don't even know Karen Read. She's some stranger to you. Most of these people who are outraged don't even know her. They are taking this up as a reality show for themselves. They want to be involved. They want to feel important. They want to do things, and that becomes problematic. Now, I'm going to go on to one of the 3 reasons I think we're running into problems these days. 1, there has become a huge hatred of the police in the United States and some other places. There's a lot of people who really, really become hateful of the police in general. And therefore, they are always looking to have the police be corrupt and conspiratorial. It's like, okay, all the police, this huge group of people, all wanted to frame Karen Read. And on top of it, not only the police, but of course the prosecution, they're the government. And the government they're all corrupt too. So it's this huge belief that pretty much everybody involved in the criminal justice system, except the defense attorneys, is corrupt. Now, the problem here again is that there's always bad apples, and there are some corrupt, there are some corrupt law enforcement, and there's some corrupt politicians. And I can name 2 of them right here. And if you can go check out my cases on this, because I've spoken up against police and prosecution in these 2 cases. One is the Superbikes case down in South Carolina. Sheriff Chuck Wright. I went to work with that department, and Sheriff Wright arrested a guy for serial killer named Todd Cullip, and then he said, "Oh, Todd Cullip confessed to the Superbikes murders," and it's an absolute lie. It's a lie, and they basically gave him a plea deal. If you confess to this, we'll get you out of the death penalty on the other case. I spoke up against that because I knew it was corrupt. And right now, the FBI is now actually investigating Sheriff Chuck Wright for all kinds of illegal crap that he was doing as a sheriff. And they are not looking into the superbikes case yet, but I will say this: both Sheriff Wright and the prosecutor's office down there were corrupt in having him give a false confession, and they know it's a false confession. You can go look at my case on Todd Kohlhepp, and if I remember to link it, I will. And it's called The False Confession of Todd Kohlhepp. That's one. The other one is the Anderson Cotta case in Virginia. I worked on that for the family. And I came up with the guy who committed the crime, Bobby Joe Leonard, a serial killer. And he was already in prison. He ended up in prison for another crime he committed. Eventually, I forgot, was it 2 decades later? Decade and a half, I can't remember now. He confessed to the Anderson Cotta murder, but he claimed that he was hired by her fiance. Her son right now believes that story. I don't know why, because it's a ludicrous story. It's nonsense. And the prosecutor's office they arrested and charged the fiance with hiring this guy to murder murder Anderson Cotta. I went to that. I actually couldn't go into the courthouse because they were trying to get me into the courthouse in order to keep me quiet. It was interesting. So anyway, I went on the last day of the trial, and he was found innocent or not guilty. He was found not guilty by the jury. They only took like 30 minutes or something. So it was a crazy. The evidence I thought was a horribly put on prosecution, which I thought was railroading, and I spoke up against that prosecution and that police department. Now that doesn't mean the police department was corrupt on other cases. I don't know what the issue was on this case. They really screwed this case up. And I spoke up on it. So can it happen? Yes, it can, but not to the level that the internet community goes on about. In every case, they're claiming corruption, and then saying the police have planted evidence. In almost every case now, the police are planting evidence. And then the Innocence Project rolls through, and they start claiming all these things as well to get all these guilty people out of prison. And then that also supports people believing that, oh my God, these people were truly innocent. And therefore, there was corruption on the part of the police and the prosecution because the Innocence Project has proven it, which they didn't. It's just the manipulations that they do. So we have this very anti-government, anti-law enforcement going on, which, again, if people would stop believing stuff just for the sake of believing it, or because it's put out there, or because they want to get all emotional about it, and look at the actual facts, they would see that for the most part, it isn't happening the way they think it's happening. It can on occasion, but let's be realistic and non-emotional about it. And because of this, because we have the internet and people can be riled up, they can be pushed into they have these groups, and the groups get bigger and bigger until there's 10,000 people all saying, oh, the police are corrupt on this case, when they're not. And that's the problem. And it looks like it's proof that this is what's going on, but it is not proof. And also the scientists, by the way, scientists are also hooking up now. There's also anti the medical system, which I don't love the medical system. I get it. But there's certain scientists hooking up with the medical system who are hooking up the scientists are hooking up with the defense attorneys to go against the medical systems, because there's like the Lucy Letby case and other cases which have happened in hospitals. Now they're claiming that the hospitals have been railroading some innocent person into claiming they murdered their serial murder of children or whatever. And so you get a whole lot of people getting involved, not for the purposes of justice, but for the purposes of making money, purposes of fame, purposes of whatever they're into. And then they bring along, because they have the internet and the media, it's gotten so out of hand. And so almost every case that comes up these days is like, oh, if it's well-known case, there's going to be all kinds of crazy stuff that happens with it. So, please be kind. Rewind. How old are you? No, if anybody remembers that, please be kind. You had to rewind your videotapes before you took them back to the video store. Lord. But there is an outrage culture. I think that's a good way to put it. And I don't know whether it's because it makes us feel, if we're being outraged, we feel like we're doing something and that we're alive. Maybe we lack enough living. Maybe if we were living great lives, we wouldn't have time to be outraged. Maybe that's it. But yeah, it's a problem. But so let me take a look at Lucy Letby. Oh, wait a minute. Let me do Diddy first. I want to point out this thing with Diddy. So Diddy, they just tossed this is a jury issue, which again we people seem to think that if it's a professional jury, they can all be somehow tampered with. So you can't trust it. You can't trust a professional jury because they can be beholden to somebody or they can be bribed. Well, guess what? Same thing's true for civilian juries. And I mean, I'm just watching The Sopranos, and the Soprano comes up to the guy afterwards and says, "Look, you better do right by what you say in that jury room because otherwise your family's dead." I'm pretty sure that would work. And there's the case in Minnesota where it was a huge Somalian ring. They made millions off of these supposedly feeding children, but they didn't feed children. They got a huge amount of government money, went to court, and they were showing up people's houses with money in a bag saying, "Hey, take this money and, have your vote for the verdict accordingly." And again, they'd only needed 1 out of those 12 people to find them not guilty. So, and somebody turned them in. Thank God they did not. Well, they turned in. They said they went and said, "I got this money from them." I still don't know if it was a whole bunch of money, all the money. But anyway, they can be bribed too. So this thing with Diddy, where are you? Okay. A juror was dismissed over conflicting statements about residency. Okay. Hold on a second. Sorry. All right. The judge presiding over the high-profile federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs dismissed a jury on Monday over conflicting statements about his residency. The jury, identified as juror number 6, reportedly claimed during jury selection that he lived in the Bronx. But last week, prosecutors said that he told a court staff member that he had been living in New Jersey, making him ineligible for a Manhattan federal jury. Taking these all together, the record raised serious concerns as to the juror's candor and whether he shaded questions to get on and stay on the jury. Well, see, just because you're a civilian juror doesn't mean you won't lie your way onto the jury. No, I have no feelings in that department. No, I'll be totally fair. I've never heard anything about this case yet. Okay. The judge's decision came after the prosecutors alerted the court to these inconsistencies. Combs' legal team opposed the juror's removal, arguing that Combs would be, quote, severely prejudiced if juror 6, who is a Black man, were removed. Juror 6 is one of 2 Black men on the jury. The alternate juror who would replace him would be a white man from Westchester, New York. So now we get to the issue of jury of your peers. A jury of your peers is supposed to be, generally speaking, a bunch of the regular population that would be living in your general jurisdiction. But how are those juries of your peers picked these days? We have a highly racialized climate right now. So I think anybody who is of one race or another can easily say, well, there weren't enough people on that jury that were my peers of my race. But as you can see, then there's people like me. I'm like, these are my children. So who are my peers? They have to be white. But then again, if it's a racialized world, then we're going to have issues. Can people look at the evidence and not pay attention to race, which we see in the O.J. Simpson case came down to that exact thing. Then we have male-female issues. If you got let's see what do they have on here? Who's on this case? Let's see. I'm looking for male-female on this. This is the Diddy case is highly a case where I think a lot of women who are very pro Me Too and who believe all women tell the truth and believe that if these women participated in his freak-offs, they were definitely under his control and forced into it. Are those his peers? If it's too many women, you know, but if you have too many men, are they like boom, 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 you know, so what, you know, is that a problem? What about his peers? Are his peers regular people or his peers Hollywood people? Do his peers, do they understand the music business? Or do they not understand the music business? I mean, I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know who the hell these peers are. And, you know, once upon a time, the claim for what peers are, let's see, what is a jury of the peers? What does it really mean? Well, and the word really is, I have to put in there, what are they? A jury of your peers in the legal system refers to a jury composed of members from the same community as a defendant, who are representative of the general population. Well, this gets very difficult, because when the general population in that area was pretty much homogenous, well, it was much easier, although male-female was always going to be an issue, because women and men think differently and they have different experiences. So who are your jury of your peers? It's a right guaranteed for ensuring a fair and impartial trial, which it does not. So it's a mess. It's a mess. And therefore, I don't have an answer for that, but which is why I prefer a professional jury. But I don't see that. You know, in this case, I don't know who are they. Now, is it going to be considered unfair because there's 11 white people, and one black person? Is that going to be a problem? Because they're not going to understand. Somebody's going to say they're not going to understand black culture. So, is that an issue? Well, you know, I'll have to say this as a person who does criminal profiling. Culture is a huge issue, not race stuff, but culture stuff, because you have to understand the culture that people are within to understand whether they're telling the truth or not, or whether they're being coerced or they're not. You have to understand all that stuff. Culture is very important. So I don't know what you do about understanding culture when there's so many mixed cultures in an area. So do you have to get enough people of each culture? You know, so that they will somehow understand. Somebody will understand this guy's culture. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Oh my God. Well, they don't, but see, this is the whole point. You're picking and so you're not supposed to choose somebody for their race or for their gender. You're not supposed to. But see, here's the problem. Now you're trying to pick people. And this is what the defense does anyway, by the way, in prosecution. I can never be on a jury ever because I am a profiler. Never be on. They'll tell. I can go now because I'm now hitting 70. I don't have to ever go. Thank God. I got my jury summons thing. I can get summoned, but once I stand up and they say, "What's your profession?" I say, "Criminal profiling." I am thanked and excused just like that. Also, the defense in this area of town, since this is a highly African American community, I am a minority here. I was called before I became a profiler. I was there, and the defendant was black, and the defense attorney just looked at me and said, "Thank you, excused." He didn't even ask me a question. So there is. See, this is not actually just a bunch of peers, just a bunch of people picked out of a hat. No, these are people. These are the attorneys playing games to try to make sure that they can compose a jury. And that's why they have these people that actually you have to pay money to help the defense pick out the jury. They have the whole thing about how to pick out a jury to give your client the best chance of winning and being found not guilty. In other words, it's not about the evidence, folks. If it were about the evidence, you wouldn't have to do that crap. But what they're doing is finding people that the defense wants. It depends. Understand that the majority of time, the defendant is guilty. That's why they're being tried in court. Not all times, but a good portion of the time, because that's why the police arrested him. That's why he's going to prosecution. So a good portion of the time they are guilty. And the defense attorneys will tell you that they know most of their clients are guilty. So they're not looking to present evidence that will prove that their clients are innocent or to argue against the prosecution's case that their evidence isn't good enough, because that's what really supposed to be. They don't have to prove their client's innocence. They just have to prove that the prosecution doesn't have enough evidence to convict them. But that's not what they're about. They're about picking a jury that will fall for what they can manipulate as best possible. That's the whole point of the defense, picking the jury. Is that justice? Wow. Is that true? In the UK, you just get the 12 people who are chosen by random by the clerk before. Really? That's interesting. I did not know that. If that's true, that's fascinating. Wow. Pretty cool. Yeah. Which was the great movie? Which was that? Is that M. M was a good movie. She's mentioning M. That was a really interesting movie. Okay, I want to talk about Lucy Letby just for a second, and then I'm going to talk about the two other nurses. So we got Lucy Letby. So this is, again, she's been found guilty in a court of law. But now the question is, wasn't she wrongly convicted? Here we go already. Is she wrongly convicted? All right, let's see. Lucy Letby. Okay, Sir Jeremy Hunt is saying she may have been wrongly convicted. Now, if you trust a jury system, how the heck could she have been wrongly convicted? That's another question. How is that? Oh, the jury was wrong, you say. The jury that you trusted was wrong. Writing in the Daily Mail newspaper Wednesday, Hunt said, let's see what, okay, wait, hold on a second. Okay, Hunt calls for urgent re-examination of the Letby case. Urgent. Former Health Secretary Sir Jeremy Hunt has called for an urgent re-examination of the Lucy Letby case after, quote, serious and credible questions were raised by experts. These experts are the new scientists who are being brought in by the defense attorneys. And if you look hard enough, you get these scientists who also want to somehow be on the side of the underdog and prove that the government was wrong. That's how they've gotten a bunch of people out of prison who should not be out of prison. Claiming that, there's scientific evidence, and there is not. In the cases I've looked at, there has not been scientific evidence. There's just a bunch of fancy words that and statistics which are garbage. But they're saying here that they are now going to the Conservative MP pleaded for the Criminal Cases Review Commission. This is like what we have in the United States now, where all these different progressive, it's mostly a progressive. In the U.S., it's usually a progressive prosecution office, and they have these now new groups. And the Innocence Project is the one that goes to these new prosecutors and pushes for a reexamination of cases. And the new prosecutor who wants to make the public like him and re-elect him will take up these cases, and behind the backs of the entire appeal system and the juries will overthrow the case and let the person go. And so the jury, now they're claiming the jury was wrong. So they believe in the jury system, but behind the back of the jury, they can now say the jury was wrong. Adnan Syed, that's exactly what happened. I mean, the jury found Adnan Syed guilty in the state of Maryland. Then this whole prosecutor thing came in. They were going to re-examine the case, and now he's free. But it didn't go back to trial. It wasn't an appeal, and the jury was considered wrong. So believe in the jury system, but don't. So anyway, he's now saying, okay, so they want the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which investigates potential miscarriages of justice, to speed up their normally painfully slow process. They're considering evidence presented by Letby's legal team from an international panel of medics claiming poor medical care and natural causes were the real reasons for the deaths of the baby she was found guilty of murdering. Now, she was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 others. And what is it? Misinterpretation, they say, of statistical stuff, data, although they'll put their statistical data out, and that's supposed to be correct. Let's see. Were these tragic deaths caused by an evil woman, or were they the result of medical error? Okay. And if these medical error was really the cause, we want to make sure no more babies die from the same mistake. So here you go out to the public and you make them fear the hospital system. The hospital system is killing the babies, not Lucy Letby. Okay, so the lawyers for Letby's victims have dismissed the medical panel's conclusions as, quote, full of analytical holes and rehash of the defense case heard at trial. But see, that doesn't matter now. The trial doesn't matter anymore. It's what you can achieve outside of the courtroom. The mother of one baby boy who Letby attempted to murder said that families already have the truth, and they believed in the British justice system, and that the jury made the right decision. But again, I'm not saying the jury made the right. See, I think you can't say that. Do juries always make the right decision? No, they don't. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't, in my opinion. In different cases, I think, yes, they did it. No, I did. Again, it's a crapshoot. So in this case, the families say they think that the dice were rolled. They got 7 and the jury was correct. But now there's other people that say the jury was not correct. So which one is it? If you believe in the system, you should either 100% believe in every jury conviction that verdict that there is. No question. There should be no appeals. There should be no nothing. The jury's right. Or if it's not always right, then why do we have that system? So anyway, they're saying a separate inquiry by the force into corporate manslaughter and gross negligence. And that's what they're going for now. Yeah, we'll ignore the totality of the evidence. We're just going to go with these things. Now, to show you what they're doing, let me go to a couple of other cases in Europe, which I've been promising for the last couple of weeks. We will go to, let's see, which one do I want to do first? Okay, we'll do Christina. Well, let me make sure I got the right picture here. Which one's she? Okay, that's her. Okay, so we go to Christina first. There she is. Christina Hansen. Yeah, she's a former Danish nurse. She was charged with the murder of 4 patients and an attempted murder of a 5th. All right, so what happened with Christina? June of 2016, she was sentenced. Jury found her guilty of 4 murders and an attempted murder. Okay. The court found it proven that Hansen had given her sick and weak patients lethal doses of morphine and diazepam. The case in the city court extended for 27 days, 70 witnesses. Let's see. And then, so May 2017, she was convicted by a single jury trial, okay, for 3 murders. The High Court review resulted in being changed to guilty of attempted manslaughter in 4 cases. On this basis, they reduced her punishment from life to 12 years in prison. The reason for the change was, I don't know what the reason was. In particular, a forensic and evidence-specific detail. Okay, what was a forensic and evidence-specific detail? Although it was found that Hansen's medical abuse on patients did not occur, quote, in treatment or pain relievers by mistake. They reviewed the information, this legal service counsel, which I guess is the same thing. We got behind the scenes, whatevers. Reviewed the medical information, concluded it was not possible to be fully sure that the morphine and diazepam injections were the direct causes of death. Okay, wait a minute. She overdosed people it wasn't an accident. She purposely overdosed people with morphine and diazepam. So she did try to kill these people. And they did die. But now they're claiming that they can't be sure that the overdose is what killed them. Well, probably because a lot of people were elderly or whatever. But still, it's clear she tried to kill these people. How the heck? And they died. See, this is the little nonsense things they go through. Then it also says, in addition to these charges, Hansen was found guilty of giving her own 7-year-old daughter strong prescription sleeping medicine that is dangerous for children and only suitable for adults. So she also was Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And she is a psychopath who, this is where Munchausen syndrome by proxy works with hospital situations quite well too. They're either nurses or caretakers who kill their own children or other people's children, or the elderly is very popular, or people who are close to death, but they push them over the edge. That's the scenario that they do. So a forensic psychologist said she was suffering from histrionic personality disorder. And so it's again, histrionics like a psychopath has more Munchausen syndrome type stuff. A person suffering from this disorder, she's not suffering from the disorder, she's a psychopath, is capable of going to extreme lengths for positive attention. So what she did was, she wanted to, he said that the defendant arranged herself in the main role character in a bizarre play where the patients were her extras. Although she was described as proficient, the psychiatric report showed that she had average intelligence. Well, that's stupid. Okay. But basically that she was killing people to get attention. And she overdosed them. So she's not innocent. But now she's got less than 12 years because she could have died. Even though she overdosed them, they could have died of something else. So that's one. You can see this nonsense, absolute nonsense. And this, again, being done outside of court. This is, so they're not trusting the jury system at all. Now let's look at the other one. The other one is this. Oops, not him. Well, I'll get to him in a little bit. This is de Berk. Okay, so now we have the Dutch woman, Lucia. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, so excuse me. Lucia or Lucia. I think it might be Lucia because it's not Italian. Lucia de Berk case. I'll call it de Berk because I'll be better on that. Okay. Oh, she's, sorry, the Netherlands. It's Netherlands case. All right. Okay, so she's a Dutch licensed pediatric nurse. Was wrongfully convicted of murder in 2003. Wrongfully convicted. How is she wrongfully convicted? By a jury. Don't they always do the right thing? Don't you have faith in the jury system? She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 4 murders and 3 attempted murders of patients under her care. All right. Her conviction was controversial. Where? In the media and among scientists. There we go again, media and scientists. So this is played outside of court for whatever attention these people like to get and be part of this, save this underdog. All right. And it was questioned by the investigative reporter, Peter de Vries. All right. Most prominently, the prosecution's case rested on statistical misrepresentation, according to these people. Okay, so the case was reopened by the Dutch Supreme Court as new facts had been uncovered that undermined the previous verdicts. De Berk was freed and her case retried, and she was exonerated. So it did go back through the court system. But now, how did this work? So in other words, one jury was wrong, and one jury was right. Oh, but it's the new information that helped the new jury be right. Okay. The colleagues started to notice that patients often died under her watch. Suspicions were raised when a 5-month-old baby turned blue and died unexpectedly only an hour after the doctor said her condition was improving. Other colleagues requested an investigation. The postmortem on the child indicated foul play. The police investigators looked into deaths that occurred between 1997 and 2001, while de Berk was working at 3 different hospitals. In a few cases, evidence of poisoning through tranquilizer overdose were found. Oh, so did she poison them? It appears so. Okay. But although in most cases, no firm, I'm putting quotes around this, firm explanations could be found for the deaths. Firm explanations. In other words, there's sometimes when you do things to people or children, it's hard to prove exactly why they died, although you were there when they all died. And you did things to them that could have caused their death, but you can't say which thing actually caused. And that's why people get away with this with children, especially babies. So she was charged with killing 13 patients and attempting to kill 5 others by injecting them with tranquilizers, painkillers, and potassium. The alleged victims included 4 babies, several toddlers, and some elderly persons. See the exact group I keep talking about. So it turns out, let's see, she had diary entries. You'll see this is just like Lucy Letby. Asserted they showed that she was obsessed by death. It was revealed she had tried to burn these diaries to destroy them at the start of the investigation. A toxicologist, an FBI profile, and a statistician were called by the prosecution as evidence. Another key piece of evidence was traces of poisonous toxins found in the blood of 3 children she is alleged to have killed, who were exhumed. Tests on a body of a 5-month-old indicated that the baby had been poisoned. Let's see. Police also found books about crimes and murders in her house, serial murders, 30 most notorious murders. Anybody could have those, so I'm not overly impressed by that. The diary I'm impressed by, but not that. De Berk admitted that she had stolen these from the hospital library. Why would you steal those books? So first of all, you're a criminal right there. You're a thief. And a thief is Why? What's the purpose? You can go buy books. Why did you steal them? The prosecution also highlighted the fact she had forged a Canadian diploma in order to qualify for medical training. She's a fraud. She's a fraudster. She's a liar. She's a cheat. She's a thief. And she forged this diploma to qualify for medical training, which clearly she wasn't qualified to get. And then she faced further charges for this falsification of records and book thefts. She admitted during the trial she had lied about her nursing credentials and had stolen the books, as well as medicine and patient files. Okay, she's a psychopath. Okay, so she's a psychopath who's around children when they die. All right. She did testify that it was rather strange, but she didn't know how it happened, that she was always present at the death of these patients. Yeah. She refused requests to go undergo psychiatric tests. They found her theatrical, narcissistic, aggressive, and suffering from a personality disorder, to which the Berk replied, "That sounds like me." Well, at least she wasn't aware she's a psychopath. Okay, so she was found guilty. In every one of the cases, de Berk was responsible for their care and medication, or was the last person present before they died or declined. There is thunder and lightning out, so if I disappear all of a sudden, that's why. So if the show ends just like that, it's because the internet went down, or the entire electricity went down. There were very high I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Digoxin, Digoxin. I think it'd be digoxin levels in autopsy blood from one child were key to the argument. It had been administered to the child, but the treatment had been discontinued some time before, and the doctor said there shouldn't be any in that child's system. And the child was disconnected from monitors at the time that the drug would have been administered. No. Okay. So anyway, they got her out. What were the doubts? Well, the chances of her having all these issues and being present when the children are dying and having these poisons in the system, it was like astronomical odds that she wasn't guilty. So that would be totality of evidence leads to not having reasonable doubt. But they stated that they're basically saying that it just all comes down to somebody saying statistically it's not proof that she did it, and we couldn't prove absolutely on this child. It's that kind of thing. So she's free. Essentially, that's what it comes. In my opinion, there's no real. The thing is, if you get a scientist in there, you can get them to say the opposite of what the other scientists said. People will always say, believe in science. When this scientist says this, they'll say, believe in that. But if this scientist says that, they'll say, don't believe in that science. So again, we have the problem of prosecution versus defense. One of them is probably not accurate. And so which science do you believe in? And to me, again, it comes down to the totality of the evidence and understanding when you put it all together, whether there should be reasonable doubt or whether you're just going to say, well, I don't understand that one thing, so therefore it's reasonable doubt. That's not true. Just because you don't understand something doesn't make it reasonable doubt. Probably means that you don't understand something, or that it's something that can't be explained because of, things aren't perfect again in life. And this is another thing people don't understand. Police investigations aren't perfect. Prosecutors aren't perfect. Witnesses aren't perfect. So if you're expecting everything to be all neatly tied up, it doesn't work that way. So I know that there was, some big issues in the Reed case where they're saying, oh, the police didn't do this properly. It was a freaking blizzard. And they weren't the top police department in the world. They were local, sometimes you do what you have to do under the circumstances. And the same thing is true when, you have an EMT arrives, you have a department. EMTs are just trained to be EMTs, and then they arrive in the ambulance and they jump out and they can screw up a crime scene. They can make poor choices. That doesn't mean it's corruption. It just means that that's the way life is. So stop believing that everything is always going to be perfect, And if it's not perfect, Even if we got 99 pieces of evidence that point that direction, I don't understand that one, so therefore reasonable doubt. That's not reasonable doubt at all. That's unreasonable doubt. So you have the reasonable doubt comes in where you really feel that the evidence is so, the prosecution tried to prove the person's guilt is just too weak, very, very weak, and that it has to be that weak. And I'll say that wrong, and not that weak, but it has to not prove it. And there's cases where I thought that person was guilty, but I just thought that, but I agreed that the evidence was just not strong enough for me to be able to say 100% the person did. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's why you do have to put on have a trial, and you have to be able to have enough evidence. And a lot of times, the reason that so many cases go unprosecuted is because the police can't arrest somebody because they're just lacking. They know the guy did it. They just don't have enough to prove it. And with a court today that wants DNA evidence every time, or video evidence every time, or a massive confession, they are not good. A lot of jurors aren't good at understanding the totality of evidence when you put everything together, things that could have happened and things that couldn't have happened. And in my opinion, that's what the Reed case came down to, is that, in my opinion, the defense case came up with something that could not have even happened according to the evidence. And I find the prosecution had the evidence on their side, but that's just me. So but that's the whole point. I think we're getting to the point where you can re-argue a case over and over again. You can start with, in the courtroom, and then you go to the Innocence Project, then you go to these new task forces where the prosecution becomes a political thing, and one person can change the whole thing. So we don't believe in the jury system. We just claim we do. So anyway, I'll go to some of your comments now. Sorry. I'll put it this way. Christoph says, experts can come to different results. This is true, because there's often room for interpretation, which is also true. But I have and that's why I always point out the totality of the evidence. Sometimes you can't just one thing. Maybe two people can come to two different conclusions, but what about all the rest of the evidence? But I have the feeling for money, experts tend in the desired direction. Yes, and the money is on the side of the defense for the most part. Let's put it this way: if you have to get a public defender, you don't have much of it. You don't have a very good. You don't have a good attorney, and pretty much a lot of times you just take a plea bargain because you have a public defender because you're poor. If you're rich enough, or you get famous enough, get enough people behind you. With GoFundMe's and all this stuff, you can then get your defense team to hire for big money the experts who say to sway things. And I've seen this, and I've been very disheartened because I've seen some people who, especially medical examiners, forensic people, who I've read their stuff. I have their books. I respected them, and I've seen them go into court and say opposite of what I know that they know. And they'll carefully word things to push it this way when they know it's really not that way. And I find that highly upsetting. And they're paid they're paid in, like, some of them are like $40,000, $50,000 for a court appearance. And so they can be bought. They can be bought by the defense. The prosecution doesn't have the money for those people. So they usually are a little weaker in their forensics people than the defense. Not because they just don't have the money. Yeah. So, well, yeah, it's a very unfortunate thing, Caitlin. It is. I mean, yeah. And, people are bought all the time in life. People are bought by attention. People are bought by fear. People are bought by, for example, in the media. I mean, I'm not on a lot. For many years, I've worked with television, and I always said what I thought, and a lot of times it wouldn't let me on to say what I thought because it wasn't their agenda. And what happens is, if it's not their agenda, I lose money, I lose income, and so people. I was very easily replaced by somebody who would follow the agenda. You know what I mean? So then you make the money. A lot of times, the money is very inspirational to people, but also fame. And they'll say anything for fame sometimes. And that's why the Me Too movement concerns me, because I think there's a lot of people who are not Me Too, who haven't really truly been sexually assaulted, who are willing to say whatever they want for political reasons or for personal reasons or for a big, huge, fat payday. And that unfortunately harms all victims of crime. And people who aren't honest in court affect the validity of the trial system. But yeah. It doesn't happen. Well, yeah, I don't know about the UK. Yeah, just US is on and off on this, whether it's sequestered or not. But sequestering is a pretty awful thing for people too. So while they're not getting, well, it depends. Again, it depends what they mean by sequestered. Because a lot of times they say, well, you're sequestered, so you can't go home to your families, but don't watch TV and don't look at the internet. Unless you take away the TV and people's phones, you can't say they're not going to see anything. The true sequestering would be pretty much imprisonment. You are imprisoned in a room where you're not allowed to leave. We'll bring you food, and then we'll pick you up to take you to the trial and bring you back. And you could be sequestered for like, what, 30, 60 days? But if you're allowing people to get on the internet, that's not sequestered, in my opinion. And if they go home, they're not sequestered. So it's also crazy. They do make a decent salary. You wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I have problems understanding this myself. It's the same thing on YouTube. I know I can make 3 times the amount of money I make doing YouTube if I just did the right things. I mean, the wrong things, but I know I could make more. But I want to sleep at night. I said that ever since I did TV or worked on any cases. I said, I always look and tell the truth. And if it just goes against what people like and I don't make any money or I lose money, so be it. That's my personal take on these things. But it also helps that I don't really need to have a yacht and an airplane and a Lexus. I don't need a fancier house. I'm a kind of simple person as far as lifestyle goes. So it helps that I don't have that kind of desire, because I think a lot of people do. I think they want the bigger lifestyle. And they see that money and they can't resist it. Oh my God, I could make that much more money. Oh my God, I can, get a bigger, I can get myself a $2 million house, and I want to get rid of that car. I really want that new car. I guess they're easily bought because they have a desire for those things. And so maybe because I don't have a desire, I'm not as easily bought. So maybe it's not something to be proud of. It's just that I'm just not swayed in that direction. Maybe if my children were starving, I could be bought. I don't know. You drive a Subaru. Love a good Subaru. I had a Subaru. It's one of my favorite cars. Yeah, absolutely. Subarus are great. Well, I do, but again, I'm not. But is it because I don't have those needs? I'm not in that position. I don't know if I've had my morals tested past the money issue. In other words, if somebody said, you either say this or we'll shoot you in the head, would I say that? I can't answer that because I'm not in that position to find out what kind of person I really am. So, yeah, who knows? Okay, I'm going to do one more thing before I go, because we're coming up right about 5 o'clock. But I did promise first I'd talk about this, so I want to talk about this quickly. And this is a case of, I don't know if anybody recognizes him, but I was asked to look into his entire case, and I can't quite do that. His name is Oli Herbert. He's a guitarist, and he died, and so, he was found dead in a pond behind his house. And this was back in 2018. He's death of all that remains guitarist Oli Herbert surprised many in 2018, and nearly 4 years later, the case has not been closed. Not long after the death, toxicology report stated he had drowned. No, that's not quite. The cause of death would be drowning, not the toxicology report. These people can't write. The toxicology report said he had certain medications in his system. But it said here the police are treating the death as suspicious. And a lot of people think the musician's wife, Beth, killed him. And she says, I absolutely did not kill my husband. Now, first of all, people don't understand what suspicious means. I want to see if I can find the claim here from the police. Hold on. Maybe it was, he'd been taking, what had he been taking? He'd been taking a bunch of antidepressants, Ambien, a couple other things. Hold on, maybe it's the other. I have two things open on this, so let me see if I can find the other one. It's undetermined. His death is undetermined. Not when people say something suspicious, they're taking that undetermined and pushing it a wee bit for purposes of saying that it's, oh, somebody killed him. Okay, this was in 2018. Okay, they're investigating this tragedy as suspicious, but are they really? Okay, so what happened here is he was age 44. She said that Oli, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but I'm not sure. That's Beth, his wife, said this, that his cause of death was drowning. She said Oli kept wanting to go outside that night before he disappeared and kept walking toward the pond, which is a pitch black part of our property, as well as very slippery. Add to the fact that it was raining that evening. Apparently he left the house after I went to bed, so I couldn't stop him and bring him back inside. A toxicology report further showed antidepressants and a sleeping aid were present in his system at the time of death. The psych meds found in his system were the same ones he had been taking, apparently without prescription. But he was taking them anyway. So it says here, this is what the Hartford Courant reported, while the state medical examiner's office ruled this week that Herbert, 44 years old, drowned, it called the manner of death undetermined. The manner of death is usually listed as homicide, suicide, or accident. But State Chief Medical Examiner Dr. James Gill said Herbert's case will remain undetermined unless new information is developed. The reason they can't say what it is because they just don't know. Drowning, he could have been murdered. He could have been pushed into the pond and held down, and so he drowned. Suicide, he could have walked into the pond and said, I'm done with everything, and thrown himself in and choked on the water and died. He could have fell in the pond and they had the medication system, didn't respond well and drowned. A lot of guys end up in the drink. I mean, because they're drinking or because they're on drugs. And we see this. It's not a smiley face killer that's killing all these young men who are near bunches of water. It is that they're near water and under conditions they shouldn't be. The only person in this case wouldn't be a smiley face killer, would only be his wife. So either he killed himself or he had an accident, just drowned, or she killed him. Those are the choices. They've left it undetermined because they can't prove anything. They apparently have no evidence that she killed him, but they also don't know if there's an accident or he killed himself. So they're just leaving it undetermined. It says here, state police sources said they are treating his death as suspicious at this point. The Eastern Detective Major Crime Squad is investigating. Now, when they say that, I don't know at what point they said it was suspicious, but this has now been, 7 years and nothing's ever come of the case. So, but they were looking, they probably said, when they said, well, we're looking at it to make sure it is not a suspicious death, people also say, well, that means they think it could be a suspicious death. So anyway, they're just reviewing his medical history and trying to figure out what could have happened. And she says, I didn't kill him. A lot of people think she did. What do I think? I think it is much more likely that it was an accidental death or suicide, just because now we can't necessarily believe what she says. He kept going to that location, down there. She says it's quite a distance from the house and it's very dark out there. We can't believe her word for it that, oh yeah, he kept wanting to go down there. And I was like, come on back. But on the other hand, he's a big dude. And how did she get him down there to kill him? Did she, under the influence, did she say, come on, let's go down to the pond and hang out and I'll shove you in there and hold you down? Is that where there's no sign of any damage to his body, no bruising, no nothing? Was she able to do that? She couldn't carry him down there because he's going to be too heavy. She couldn't drag him down there because he would have been too heavy and there would be marks in the ground. So obviously that's not what happened. So she would have had to literally go with him walking to the pond and then shove him in. Could she have done it and then he just drowned? Sure. Is there any proof she didn't? No. Is it more likely for a guy who's got some issues and is taking medications he's got too many of in his system, ended up there on his own volition? Probably. So that's why I will not look into it further, because there's no reason to. The police have come up with nothing that proves any kind of guilt on her part. So there's that. So anyway, what are you saying here? Pat, sounds like a small thing, but you often said you don't like people who lie. I think that's great. Although I've lied. Cheated. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not fond of lying. Lying drives me crazy. Because I always feel like lying takes away the other person's right to make determinations for themselves, because somebody's lied to them. And so they don't, they're basing stuff on an untruth. So, and that can be because they've lied on television, and then they're misleading people, which is wrong. It can be, a friend who just says something which isn't true. And then, you base whatever it is on what they said, and it wasn't true. And of course, what I always tell my kids, once you lie, don't trust you anymore. I'd rather you just tell me what you think, or give your opinion, or tell me the truth, whatever it is. At least I'll know it's the truth. And, maybe I'll get over whatever it was. But, I tell my kids, don't you lie to me. Because once you do, everything you say from that point on, I will question. So that's why I don't like lying. I think it's not fair to the other person, and it also ruins relationships. Let's see. Les says it's a nightmare scenario for his wife if she's innocent, because people will never stop suspecting her since there's no final determination. Yeah, and she actually came out and she's like, I didn't kill him. She's fed up with this stuff, because again, you get Facebook pages, you get little websites, and and she's just trying desperately to say, hey, no, I didn't kill my husband. But if people don't want to believe somebody, they won't believe somebody. And in this case, there is nothing that proves that she did anything to him. And there's sometimes there is a difference when you get a lot of evidence that points towards somebody. As a professional, if you ask my opinion, I will give my opinion on a case. And I will also be concerned, like in the McCann case. Some people say, why did you speak up so much in the McCann case? Because they were not honest, the McCanns. And they had a fund. I think the fund was what bothered me more than anything else, because they had a fund asking for people for them to search for Madeline, and they never accounted for the money that the people sent in. These nice people sent them to find Madeline, and they hired crooks to look for her in all the wrong places. That made no sense. So I always thought the fund was fraudulent, and there were tons of other reasons to say, hey, there's concerns here. But in a case where there just isn't anything, then you just have to say that, well, I don't know, could be true, but I'm not going to sit here and have a whole website. I am going to do a show, by the way, on a case I was asked to look into, and there's websites making claims that I know are not true. And so I'll be doing something on that. But it really bothers me. Again, somebody is willing to make claims based on things that aren't true, just because they're angry, because they're sad or whatever. But if there's no information, I mean, it's just no reason to go on and have huge groups of people going after somebody for when there's not even a shred of evidence pointing their direction outside of the fact they were there at the time. They were in the house. I mean, so I haven't seen enough. There's a whole bunch of information I don't know about. That's a whole different case. If the police said, hey, Pat, we'd like you to come look at this case, and I went and looked at that case, and I found out that when I'm looking at all the stuff going, holy crap, all this stuff I didn't know. I think she might have done something to him. Well, then that's a different matter. But as far as I couldn't find anything on the internet that was supported by the police, and not a bunch of people just wanted to say stuff. So, yeah. Yes, that is true. There was that was the thing about the peers, that the nobles were considered less than the people above them. So less than the nobles were less than the ruling class, so they didn't want the ruling class to be the peers of the noble, to be the jury for the nobles. So they wanted the nobles to be the same class. So yeah, so it's just that now the nobles never cared about people below them. so there's, the whole class thing is another, to tell you the truth, is another issue. Rich people versus poor people. Are they peers? It's very, very tough. I mean, it's a messy situation, but I guess what I'm bothered by is people who believe 100% in the civilian system when that system makes no sense. Now, to try to figure out how to improve the system, to try to figure out, okay, if you don't want a professional system, how could you improve the civilian jury system? Could it be or if you think the professional jury system is reasonable, but that's got some issues with it too, how can we work with that? So, but I haven't seen anybody anywhere, except for a few people who've spoken up for the professional jury system, like myself, ever do anything about it. It's just like people just go blindly on and say, oh, we got the best system in the world. Our jury system is great. But we don't, but nobody really trusts their jury system, as we see by all the nonsense that goes on outside of the jury system. So we're just not able to sit down and say, hey, nothing is going to be perfect, but can we figure something out here? Like maybe the jury system would work better if at least we put a gag order so that the jury wasn't already contaminated before it even got into the court. Maybe there should be you can't be outside the court with your free Karen Reed signs. That shouldn't be allowed. I mean, first of all, she wasn't even imprisoned. She wasn't even convicted yet. So you didn't need to free her. You just need to have a good defense for her, or have a proper defense and a proper jury. And but the fact that everything is so messed up, and nobody wants to fix it, and nobody wants to even talk about it. And I think I'll say this: I think one of the reasons nobody wants to talk about it is because two people really benefit. The defense attorneys are making a killing on all of this stuff with all these new prosecutorial, review things, with the Innocence Project, with the fact that defense attorneys make a fortune going to court. The longer the case, the more appeals, they make more money. And I think the people who are getting involved from outside are finding something to do with their time. They're feeling important and like they're contributing to something. I would rather see all these people contribute to their local community. Help the children in your local community. Help there be safety in your local community. Get rid of drugs in your local community. Have better schools in your local community. Do something in your local community. Sitting on the internet and saying free Karen Reed and screaming and yelling at everybody wasn't really, But of course, because now she's been freed, people think they have contributed to saving this woman from the system and the corrupt police. But I'm bothered by it. Maybe juries could be assembled from the public, but have jurors who have experience in various areas. Well, that would be interesting. That's kind of my theory about the whole concept of a professional jury system, is that you could go to jury school. People from all walks of life could attend jury school. And I don't mean jury school by 3 hours. I mean, actually get a jury degree, and you wouldn't have to know. You have to learn you have to learn profiling, because to me, that's what jurors are. They are the ultimate profiler. Because I've had people say, well, Pat Brown, you don't have any credentials to be a criminal profiler. I do have a master's degree and I have worked in the field for 20 years, but okay, Pat Brown doesn't have any credentials. But the jurors are doing the exact job that I do, analyzing the evidence, understanding physical evidence, behavioral evidence, statement analysis. That's what they're doing, the job of a criminal profiler, with zero education, zero training, and zero experience. And chucked in there and told, in the next 30 days, you're going to be a top criminal profiler and figure it all out and come to a conclusion. But Pat Brown, she's not qualified. So I would like to see people who would like to be a juror go through criminal profiling schooling, and they would learn how to analyze evidence and how to learn to judge these different things. And they would go through a whole schooling program on that and graduate. Would everybody be a great criminal profiler? No, but it's got to be better than what we got now. But I don't know. I'm just looking for ways to improve something and just not say, oh, I have faith in our jury system when it's failing dismally. And the only reason people think it actually is successful at all is because the majority of cases that go to trial, the people are guilty, and it's so obvious that the jury finds them guilty. And the defense attorney, who's usually a public defender, just picks up his crappy paycheck and goes home. And that's that. So it's just frustrating to me because I see all these things that are problematic, and I just don't see anything ever being done about it. So I don't know how you fix it. I mean, oh my gosh. Well, and I don't think they are easier to fool, and that is true for both defense and prosecution. To some extent, that's the truth, but they're not dumb people. Yeah, I don't think that the jurors are necessarily dumb, although some of the people who have commented to me aren't that bright, but you should want the smartest. You should want at least trained people, if nothing else, just at least let them be trained. Not every doctor is that smart. Not even every lawyer is that smart, but at least they're trained. So you think everybody should be trained except the jurors? Everybody. How is that? How does that make sense? You can't testify in court unless you're a trained profiler. You can't testify in court unless you're a trained doctor. You can't testify in court unless you're a trained psychologist. You can't be in court as an attorney unless you're trained as an attorney. But jurors, 12 people off a bus stop. Come on, guys. Some logic seems to be missing here. Just seems to be totally missing. Oh my God. Just kind of craziness. Christoph says it's a balancing act, professional or amateur. With amateurs, it can be engaged. With professional, they can be corrupt. But amateurs, yeah. They both do have their arguments, but I just think something more sensible. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, never. But you want to do the best you can. I mean, otherwise you have chaos, which is kind of what we have in the courtrooms these days. It's just chaos. It's just nonsense. And I'm watching this, just going, it's a circus. It's like, what kind of crap is this, And then you see the verdicts that are made, and one group cheers, the other group is furious, and so, and then somebody benefits, usually the attorneys. Usually the attorneys. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I got a bunch of other things. I'm going to do them next hangout. And so I think I may be doing a show on toxic relationships, the other side of toxic relationships, based on the toxic series out now. And also somebody was asking me about this book or about this case. The book is called "I Married a Charming Man, and Then He Tried to Kill Me." And I haven't read the book yet, but she, to me, is the example of the other side of what people are trying to talk about. So toxic relationship, where you have a person who becomes dangerous in the relationship, but how did that other person get stuck with that dangerous, toxic person? That's what I find interesting, because it just kind of like blows me away sometimes. I'm like, what? So that's this case is a very, very fascinating case. I'm going to do that one, and I'm going to do the House of, so it's going to be a combo of, forgot the name of it, the House of, okay. Let's see. You're gonna some of you will recognize the name of this person. Where is it? Oh, I'm trying to remember the shoot. Hold on a second. Toxic series. Okay. I'm watching it on Max. I will be watching it. So Elizabeth Chambers. Elizabeth Chambers. She's the reality show person who was with Artie Hammer and the House of Hammer. And his story is, wow, It's real interesting. So I'm going to do a bit about their story. I'm going to do a bit about the first episode of the Toxic Show, which I thought was also fascinating. And I'm going to do a bit about this woman who parachuted down to Earth, and her husband damaged both the parachutes, and she crashed and survived. Go figure. I mean, that's just unbelievable right there. But so I'm going to do those 3 stories. It's going to be a separate video. I might do that tomorrow. So if I get it done, and then I'll do something different on Sunday for the show. So the House of Ham was something to watch. Yeah. So a number of people have seen that. So anyway, so that's what I'm going to probably this combo. Oh, Victoria, the I survived the parachute thing was Victoria Silius skydive murder attempt. Unbelievable. She plummeted 4,000 feet to ground. Both parachutes, her standard and reserve parachutes, didn't open. They were convinced she died, so they brought the body bag out, but she was alive. And the police immediately suspected her husband of doing that to her. So, and that story is just, so this is all about these 3 toxic relationships, but who clearly, these are guys you don't want to be involved with, but why are the women involved with these men? And it kind of blows me away. And I think it's what all these shows try to ignore. And so, I got to say something about it, because my opinion is I like to see women and men not make foolish mistakes that get them hooked up with people that they shouldn't be hooked up with. Because once you are, it's like, oh, look, it's a spider. I think I'll go live with it. That's a black widow. If it's a black widow spider, maybe you shouldn't go live with it. It's like the black widow spider is still going to be a black widow spider. You can't change that, but you cannot live with it. So that's going to be what my video is going to be about, which I hopefully will get done tomorrow. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. It was fun, and that's so I'm going to hopefully never talk about Karen Reed again and the jury thing, but that's just where I stand on all this jury stuff and all these different cases. And I just find so much of it is just become a free-for-all as far as anybody who can get involved and get something out of it will, whether it's the right thing to do or not. And that bothers me. And that's why I don't like the Innocence Project, because I don't think they care about innocence. I think they care totally about getting people out of prison to prove that the government is bad. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not why they're doing it. So problematic. Did he write one? Oh, she wrote a book too? Interesting. Yeah, all right. Very cool. Oh, I'll have to check that out. So that'll be my job tomorrow. If I don't get it done tomorrow, I'll have to put the thing out on Saturday, because I can't read everything. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Again, if you're new to the channel and still hanging around, like and subscribe, and join Patreon if you like to be in the chat room with these great people. And I will see you guys most likely on Sunday, unless I have to move the time, the date or time. Could happen. See you later. Bye.